Hey everyone, and welcome to part 5 of 5, the finale of my coverage of 8.1 in the British Tech Tree inclusion. I'm going to be covering tiers 9 and 10, which everyone's highly anticipating, and so I'm going to go ahead and dive right into those here shortly. There's going to be one heavy and one medium per tier, so a total of 4 tanks again in this short little finale. So we'll go ahead and dive right in here to the Centurion Mark 7/1. This medium does get a decent bump in health, but the armor remains almost identical to the Centurion Mark 1. So you'll be taking advantage of the slope of the armor as well as the slope of the turret and hiding your hull behind terrain and taking advantage of a hull down position. Now this one, in addition to from here on out, you'll see all the heavies and mediums must get the engine upgrade as soon as possible. At stock, this thing only has a tier 5 engine. It does receive a massive increase in cannon penetration and has comparable damage to all other tier 9s. So it finally comes in line with every other tank that are out there. It is very similar to the Patton, but has a slower rate of fire, but it does have more penetration. So if you enjoy the Patton, you'll enjoy this tank. Now, the slower rate of fire is actually slower than almost all the other tier 9s, but the penetration does make up for all this difference, and it really becomes a total sniper tank with this gun. It does have excellent gun depression and additional uphill speed, so you'll be able to get into sniping positions, take advantage of only exposing small parts of your tank or just your turret in order to hit your targets. The shells do drop off at a medium to long range though, so you will have to be conscious of this arcing effect and make sure you're aiming above your target. So this thing should play as to only expose the turret and use the hills to your advantage. Otherwise you will get penetrated very easily, as this tank really doesn't have the potential to fight off 9s and 10s as it does lower tier tanks. So treat this thing as a sniper, use hills to go hold down, use the gun depression to your advantage, and of course, play it very similar to a Patton, but expect it to be slower. And you definitely have a much better penetration rate than the Patton, so you'll be able to really get those targets that you couldn't before, and at longer ranges too. So, moving on to the tier 9 heavy, the Conqueror. The Conqueror has a decent bump in health as well, and it has a top turret with less armor but much greater slope than the starting turret. So you're going to lose that slope armor that you're used to from the Centurion, the Cornivian beforehand, etc., etc., and you're going to have a very slopey turret that's going to be hard to penetrate as rounds will just glance right off of it. It does need, as I spoke earlier, the upgrade to the engine. This is important, otherwise you're going to be dragging feet to get anywhere. It is a massively improved cannon as well, as it has very high damage and pen, but it does have a lower rate of fire than one might expect, at about 10.5 seconds per reload. So this actually does bring it in line with the M103. It is very similar to M103 and should be played almost identically. It has the great ability at bouncing if properly angled, and so this is one thing you'll need to practice, is angling this tank to bounce shells off. Its turret exposure is its asset. You'll want to only expose the turret if you can do so that shells will just glance right off the sides of this thing if pointed directly at people. This tank is really meant to be used as another hull down tank, but it can, if caught in the open, turn its hull and be able to glance shots off at an angle. So we're going to go ahead and move into the tier 10s, which everyone wants to know the most about. So we'll go ahead and start with the FV4202, the medium tier 10. It has very low armor for tier 10, but it has excellent slope to help make up for this fact. So if angled properly at a corner, it will glance shots right off the top of it anytime. It has excellent rate of fire, excellent penetration, and excellent damage. It does have a slightly slower speed than most other tier 10 mediums, and so this will have to factor in choosing where you want to go and where you want to support. It does have a rather good gun depression, so again it can take advantage of being hull down and using terrain to its advantage. It is a solid choice at tier 10, and it has a very accurate gun, so it can be used as a sniper as a medium that can also relocate and choose where it wants to play, as opposed to a tier 10 heavy sniper where those can get stuck in one location, not being able to relocate fast enough to make a difference. Out of all the tier 10s, this easily was my favorite, and so I do recommend this over the FV215 Bravo. But again, that is just my personal opinion. I feel that the medium tree does go leaps and bounds further than the heavy tree for the British. Speaking of the heavy tree, the FV215 Bravo does have a lower armor, but again, is very sloped. The one problem with it is a rear mounted turret, and this really is a problem as you have to expose yourself in a city fight in order to get shots in. And it really becomes a hindrance in this fact as you're going to be tracked out in the open before you can even target your opponents, as you're sticking yourself out there before your turret can come around that bend. And this really will hurt it in the fact that if you're in a corner fight against somebody, they can continually track you and there will be very little you can do if you get caught alone. You will need to perform operations with friends, otherwise you will get caught alone. And you'll be unable to respond to things as your gun will not be able to see the opponent. So, it has very fragile sides, but it is a very slow tank. So you'll want to make sure you're always pointing and angling at your opponent. And you do not, again, want to be caught around corners. You'd rather be caught in a straightaway where you can deal with your opponents headlong and not be hindered by corners. It does have a similar performance to the T110E5, but it actually has faster rate of fire, almost a full second faster rate of fire than the E5. But again, it is slower and less armor than the E5, so this is something you'll have to remember when you play it. But again, if you have experience in the E5, this tank should come fairly natural. This tank does perform pretty good as a mid or rear line tank. It is not your up-close front brawler as some of the other tier 10s. It is best left as a middle range tank or a background tank supporting around your others. If you perform your engagements this way, you'll do just well. So things to remember are that it is not a frontline tank at all, and that the rear turret will hinder it if you get into a city fight. You're better off sticking to the exteriors. So for Inks, or for any of the others, you'll want to stick to that outside area where you can take advantage of the terrain as opposed to take advantage of the city, because you will not be taking advantage of those corner buildings. As for recommendations, again, I recommend the medium over the heavy, but that is personal opinion and experiences within the test server. So, as a quick recap to everything, I just want to sum up and say that thank you for tuning into my coverage of 8.1. I know it took a little bit to get all these episodes out. I hope you guys enjoyed them. And something to note that while these are my experiences and my trials and tribulations, do not let them affect you. You are best off going and trying these for yourself and just taking my experiences as advice and things to look out for. Keep in mind that in the test server, a lot of times I would be the only tier 8 or tier 9 in a swarm of tier 10s or in battles where there was 7 or 8 artillery per side. So this really does skew the results. And also, I was only operating with standard ammunition. I did not purchase gold rounds, whereas I imagine a lot of other people were. So that could, of course, skew my results in terms of your ability to bounce shots, get shots penetrating, etc., etc. So, with that disclaimer, your experience will vary from mine once we get into the test server or into the actual servers upon release of this patch. So, I hope you guys enjoy the British tanks. I hope you all figure out which ones suit you and that you enjoy playing them. I will catch you guys in the main server. Thanks for tuning in. I'll catch you guys in the next episode.